Hey, welcome everybody. This is John Paul Mendoza, Dr. Speed Selling. This is the Raging Verbalist number 147. Glad that you're here. And, if you've never been here before, well, it's time that you join. Hit the subscribe, hit the favorite, like it, whatever you want to call it. You can also go to our Facebook page, Position to Win Book. You can also go to positionwinbook.com. Don't traipse into politics, but talk about lots of interesting topics. And with me, as always, standing in for you is the ever lovely Sandra. Welcome, Sandra.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Doing great. I'm on the road. Great lighting. Have my mug here that says Vail because we're going for the peak. We're going to the top. Ta-da! That works great. All right. So what are we going to talk about today? Lay it on me, Sandra.
All right, so first off, congratulations on 40 years in selling high tech. So what got you interested in high tech?
Well, in some ways you could say that, I just kind of stumbled into it, but I didn't. What I did was I read the book, Positioning the Battle for Your Mind. I said, that's really interesting. They didn't really talk about positioning yourself, but that's why I wrote my own book about that and other things. And but what I said is, there's something in here for me. And at the time, I was selling, variety of things, but what I was selling is office products, office supplies. And I realized that I was never going to really make great money or spectacular money. So what I did was I said, how do I position myself and do what I call a pivot? And that pivot is to, get closer and get into a different business. And so that's what really got me interested in high tech, because I started reading about all these different businesses and industries and things I could sell. And I realized that if I got into high tech, I could actually just go forward and probably make a whole lot more money, which I had no idea how much more, but I would find out later on. So yeah, that was 40 years ago. And of course, I always talk about people never saying the real backstory, like Bill Gates' mother, her client was IBM. You think that helped Bill get into IBM? I don't know. I mean, maybe it was coincidence. But in my case, my coincidence or my nepotism was that my brother was an engineer who then went to the dark side and went into sales. So of course, every place that he worked, I would go and sell them stuff, and there you go. So that's how I kind of got that crack in the door. But you have to do something. You can't just get there and then laze around. All right, so that's how I kind of did it. Positioning, pivoting, and made a really big radical change in my life.
All right, what was your first high tech gig?
So what I did was I thought it was going to be a great thing. Is I ended up going to work for a place called West Tech Data Systems, and what they were is a manufacturer's rep. Little did I know, manufacturer's reps, for those of you who don't know, in the world of high tech, those are like the lowest form of life. It's like the shit you scrape off your shoe kind of thing. And what you do is you represent a lot of companies that can't afford to have direct sales people, or they haven't even gotten distribution going. And, they've got some innovative kooky idea that they're going to do. And so they would use manufacturer's rep. So started working for a manufacturer's rep. And the interesting thing is that Jim, who was the senior partner and owner, if you will, because it was kind of an odd company. And he said, well, I've never hired a non-tech person. And I've never hired, so I've never hired a non-tech person, let alone somebody who has like zero real experience. But tell you what, you kind of look like a smart enough guy. So I'm going to pay you half the draw. For those who don't know, draw looks like salary, but it's not, because you got to pay it back. So I'm going to pay you half the draw. And I said, okay, I'll take half the draw, but I want, better cut, better commissions, and negotiate a better commission deal. And away we went. Of course, Jim did not know how much stuff I would sell. And as I started to sell more stuff, Jim regretted that, because he eventually came back to me in like 90 days and said, John, I've got great news for you. I'm going to upgrade your status to full status and increase your draw, but of course, decrease your commission. And I said, well, Jim, that's why we signed a 1-year deal. So you can do that when we get to the end of the year, which of course, Jim was like, geez, guy isn't as young as I thought he was. So that was my first high tech gig. And being a manufacturer's rep, I got exposed to lots of different weird little companies and some really interesting companies, but lots of little weird companies. And it was a great baptism of fire because we could walk in, and the ironic part is that we had what's called the line card, and the line card had all of these different companies that we represented, and that was like kind of a bulletized list. And then there were the offline cards. So if you had somebody that you took on as a rep, because I was in the mountain states in Colorado in particular, and I covered North Denver and Boulder County and points north, is that what they would do is we had a bunch of lines that didn't fit on the line card because you could only have so many on the line card without looking like you didn't know what you're doing. But who knows? Maybe they would give us they would win a piece of business and we'd get paid a commission. So that was my first dive into this thing.
All right. And what were some of the early strange and really bizarre things you were selling early on?
So one of the things that we sold was what was called a mesh, wire mesh room. So it was like a Faraday cage. So that'll get you out there Googling it. And, who knows what kind of weird, kinky thing will pop up if you type that into Google. I don't know. But anyway, like we had that on there. I never sold one, but and when you're a rep, every principal wants to get like some mind share, and they're trying to tell you, yeah, okay, this is what needs to happen, and this is and all these other things. So yeah, so that was a weird thing. Also, we sold touch screens. And this is like a real touch screen, and think 40 years ago. So a touch screen to an OEM, which is an original equipment manufacturer. So they would incorporate. So this is like you slap it on any computer. Was like $1,100 once you started buying lots of these. So that was a kind of an interesting thing. I also started selling. So it was just a variety of those kind of companies. Company that was selling these little tiny, what we would today call probably, like a palm-sized computer. I mean, which is already come and gone, and it was a full-size computer internally, but it was a little one, and people liked it for diagnostics, but it was crazy expensive. And sold data. We sold data, hard drive, disk systems, and those kind of things. So those are like some of the variety, but it was a lot of variety. It's like 15 to 20 lines on the real line card, and then God knows how many we had in the other ones. And was kind of an interesting, bizarre jump into this thing. And quite literally, I would walk in, and you get to wear different hats because people would say, "Hey, what do you know about XYZ company?" which was on my line card. And of course, you'd have to think fast and go, XYZ, XYZ, XYZ. Do we still rep those? Oh, yeah, we do. Oh, hey, yeah, great product, great people. Where are they at? Who knows? So yeah, that was my first foray into selling high tech.
All right. And what was your first big leap in selling high tech?
Well, I realized, and this is one of the pivot things that I studied, which is, since I was selling against engineers, because my competitors were all engineers, everybody who was selling it was an engineer who had, like a fallen angel, had fallen from the graces of heaven of engineering and then started selling for whatever reason. And therefore they had very little sales knowledge and experience, and they didn't do that. So the thing that really was kind of like that breakthrough thing for me was the fact that I would show up, rain, shine, hot, cold. And little quick story was that there was this company called Storage Technology, still around, was a big company. And I was trying to get this deal through, and I had this rusty Subaru station wagon, not like they look today, but it was a little 4-wheel drive. And this thing was like a little mule. I mean, it would go anywhere. So I'm trying to get this order. And of course, what I did was I drove out to Storage Technology, and I found the guy who was trying to get it. And he says, "John, the requisition installed." And we found it, and we literally walked around the campus, sludging, trudging, all of that. And what I did was I ended up getting that order, and it made a huge impression on Tommy, who would later hire me and move me to California. because he said, if this guy will go out under treacherous conditions, again, to somebody in lives in, the Silicon Valley, treacherous is a different thing than if you lived in Colorado, but it worked out really well. So for anybody who's a wannabe, I would suggest that what you do is you learn how to show up, and you know how to do things uniquely and go out of your way to stand out. And that has always worked well for me. And it works in any industry, but in high tech in particular, people kind of don't expect that. People don't say, oh yeah, no, I'll do that. That makes sense. What they do is they end up like, whiffing it. Oh, well, and especially today, oh, we'll do a Zoom call. No, sometimes you got to show up, because if you show up, it means a lot. Which gets me to, if you're going to want to show up and you want to do really well, what you're going to want to check out, what you want to pick up, especially as the holiday season is approaching and the new year, you want to figure out how to get more stuff out of life, and you want to, maybe become successful at this, is you check out my book, which is, well, not that one. You check out this one first, which is Most Businesses Fail in the First 5 Minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize it. Position to Win, available in real atoms, hard, not hard copy, but real paper, available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. You can also get it from positiontowinbook.com website. You can ask me to sign it, and I will, and we can go from there. And then the other one, I'll get that right eventually. Got it if I can in a mirror, is Remote Work for a Better World, which talks about how to go out and become more successful in using Zoom. Now, back to the Raging Verbalist.
All right. What was the worst job you've had in high tech?
Well, I got, so I have to do a little bit more of the story. I got moved to Southern California by a company called Data Systems Design. I thought of it as like a Camelot job. I mean, I had to beat a guy who they had fired, who had done a miserable job. And I just kind of worked like crazy and had done really well. Signed 6 OEMs in the first year, not expected, and nobody's expected to do that. And what they did to motivate me to go get one of my worst jobs ever was they cut my commissions in half for the next year. So that was not a cool thing. That was a wake-up call. So actually, I'll tell you, there are 2 companies that were the worst decisions I ever made. And I don't know if either one's still around, don't care. But one of them was actually later on, and this is like in the worst pantheon of that. And this company was called Auspex, and these guys had raised $35 million. I had, this headhunter who said, John, these guys, they want you, they love you, they need you, you're the right guy. I mean, who doesn't want to have that kind of adulation and, ego stroking and all that? And I said, I'm only going to go because they got this great gig that I'm in. If they're going to give me a year guarantee, doesn't matter, pay or play, they're going to pay me. And they said, yeah. And I was like, shit, howdy, of course I'm going to do that. Now, it turned into one of the worst jobs ever, because when I showed up, I realized a couple of things. First off, they all had too much money. Like when we talk about in the book, most businesses fail. These guys were going to fail because they had raised too much money, and therefore they believed in things that weren't even remotely possible. So let me give you the tale of woe. First sales meeting pops up, and we are staying at the Willard Hotel. If you don't know what that is, it's in Washington, D.C. We're going to go to this big giant Unix convention. Unix, for those who don't know what that is basically Linux, but actually Linux was a ripoff of Unix. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, we're there, and they're staying at the Willard Hotel, which is really upscale, really expensive. And they lay out for us, of course, I had my contract, but they lay out that their expectation is that we were going to sell on average a $300,000 to $375,000 piece of hardware. It was an amazing file server. And these people are going to build file server farms and everything. Well, you know what? Probably at least 15 or 20 years ahead of their time, but it sounded great. However, they had this really cool chart, this Gantt chart it's called, and it showed their sales process. I was blown away. Somebody actually had written out a sales process, what needed to happen. There's only one problem, is that they said, we're going to be able from lead to contract sell this, let's say $350,000 hunk of iron in 90 days. And I was like, whoa, you know, flag on the play. For those who understand American football, that ain't possible. What are you guys talking about? No, John, no, you know, you're not as smart as we are. We're all super smart guys. This is going to happen. You know, the market is just begging for this thing. I mean, you guys are just going to walk in and, you know, the money is going to come to me and you and all that. Now, that was bad enough. And that was before lunch in the first day of the sales meeting. Now, by that point in time, I already understood that all sales meetings are like Latin American elections. Vigorous debate, but the guys with the guns decide who's the El Presidente and where this thing is going. So I knew not to like get myself shot. What the heck? I'm getting paid and all of that. And then I get to the show and they had a stainless steel obelisk. Now, this is like Stanley Kubrick 2001, big giant obelisk, stainless steel, had to have a special box, and they spent like $100,000 on this. Now, what is the disconnect? Why did it become the worst job, one of the worst jobs? Why did it become all that? Well, because they had a cap on using your cell phone. I'm covering Southern California. I have a cell phone. I went from a gig in which they understood that I wasn't talking to, you know, my wife and my friends. I was talking to customers, and they had a cap of $100 a month. For those of you who never were around in those days, you know, maybe you were not even being conceived, you know, maybe there wasn't even, you know, who knows what was going on. $100, they charged you $55 a month just to be hooked up to their cell system, let alone minutes. So that was a problem. The other thing is that since they were an amalgam of all these different cultures that came from all these different high-tech companies, they were out of their minds because they didn't have a cohesive structure. So the VP of sales, who I worked for, because he had no regional managers, that's fine, small company, we're startup. And he comes into town and I said, hey man, we got to like work some of these things out. First and foremost, I'm going to these big companies. I love selling technology, complex technology, big companies, but we got to get some things figured out. Oh, John, no, you don't understand. His experience, by the way, is that he had worked at Intel, good on him, made a fortune, then worked. And by the way, if you worked at Intel when he did, you talk about rising tide, rises all the boats, wake up on second base, think you hit a double. This guy had it. He drove a Rolls Royce. I mean, I know a lot of people who have thought about it. He drove one and he didn't buy it used. He didn't have a, you know, he bought it brand freaking new. And I said, okay. So we're living with all these constraints. Well, you know, if you gotta be careful if you're going to go out to lunch. This was still a time when you did that. Well, let me explain the end of this dilemma. He wants to make a call to his wife on my cell phone while we're stuck in traffic. And I said, can't do it, pal. Can't do it. I only got this much money. I only have this many minutes. Can't do it. He was not happy with me. Next time, I get the VP of marketing and we go into this big company, giant oil company. We'll leave their name out for right now. I go in there. This is going to be the big meeting. John has pulled it off. The VP shows up. These guys have the money. These guys match my disqualification. And the guy says, I don't know how Mendoza has done this, but I have 3 different groups of people. They're all in this room. They all work for me. I can't get them to attend a single meeting together, but this guy's pulled it off. But let me tell you, he's done an outstanding job. However, we're never going to buy from you and he had a presentation about why he wasn't going to buy from us. So I get in the car with the VP of marketing, and this guy is a piece of work. Again, I'll leave his name for future books, so you have to look for him. And we're driving, and his name was Richard, but he went by Dick. Well named. And we're driving down the road, and he starts what is arguably called the slow windup. The slow windup is, if things don't improve, changes are going to have to be made. Now, by the way, if you're out there and you want to learn how to fire people, that's not the way to do it, because unless they're, some kind of mental diminishment, you're going to figure out what's going on. And I said, well, Dick, I'm going to tell you, if you guys don't straighten out, I'm going to have to fire the whole bunch of you. To which he turned very red. He's a white guy, very red. And he got really pissed. And he started hitting the dash of my car. And he goes, "You're one arrogant MFer. I can't believe this." And on a 8-lane highway on one side, I pull over to the side of the road. We're 2 miles from the nearest exit. And I said, "Dick, if you don't settle down and become an adult, you're going to have to get out of my car." Now, I used several bits of profanity. And he's like, "What?" And I said, "Hey, Dick, I'm telling you, gather yourself up, man, because I ain't putting up with this childish behavior." We drove the rest of the way back to the hotel in silence. I knew that the clock was ticking. So I get this phone call, not from my boss, but from Dick. "John, been thinking about some of the things you said, and we should probably have you come up to corporate and get together." And I said, "Dick, that's a great idea. Let me do that." And I boxed everything up that they had ever sent me, 11 boxes. These are the days when you could ship them on the airplane for like $10 a box. And I showed up, and I'm in the lobby, and the person at the desk calls up and gets Dick immediately. He goes, why didn't you just send him up?" "Well, he's down here with some boxes." "What?" And Dick walks down and he goes, "John, what's all this?" And I hand him a clipboard with a legal release and the terms of which we're going to part company, including sending a check. And he goes, "John, I don't even know what you're talking about." And I said, "I do, and you do. And here's an inventory of all your stuff. And I need a receipt for it." So I go up to the conference room, and of course, there's the person from HR, there's the person from legal. And I said, "Dick, if you're going to lie, you really got to get better at it, okay?" That really helped out. That's like a bonus little rapport builder for all of you out there. And he got bullshit crazy, to which the attorney said, "Dick, I think you need to leave the room." And Dick's like, "Argh," and he leaves the room. And I said, "Okay, I understand what's going on, and this is what you have to do." And they're like, I said, "Well, that's why I understand how you have the right guy. You don't have the team that works for me." End up sitting there with the president of the company, the founder of the company, Larry, who was a really nice guy. And he goes, "Geez, John, I don't know why it didn't work out." I'm like, "Cultural issues, other things, uneven expectations." And he said, "Well, so I know we have to write you a check." And I said, "Yeah, you're lucky I'm not asking you to make it a cashier certified check." And Larry gets a little bristly, and I said, "Yeah, but this is how I would negotiate for you with customers. This ain't my first rodeo." By the way, I still have 2 mugs and 2 t-shirts from these guys. So maybe I did salvage something. So that was my worst one. That was my worst one. And we're, I know we're kind of going long. So, I'm just going to say, we may need to skip down a bit and do like version 2 of this, because, I know the next question, and it's going to be too long for that one. But that taught me a lot of lessons, by the way. And it taught me like how people really do dumb things, especially when they hire people, but more importantly, their expectations. So this is so important. I got to, and we'll do this. And then, so I'm looking at the clock. I know, Sandra, we got a lot more to do, but what we're going to do is we're going to do a wrap up. We're going to do a part 2. Okay.
All right.
So I'm sitting there with the guy from the big oil company. And again, this guy is totally prepared, and his people give us feedback that I would consider golden, not easy to take, right? Nobody wants to come up and say, "Oh, is that your baby?" And you go, "Yeah," and you go, "Who is that your wife?" "Yeah." "Well, your wife is ugly, the kid is ugly, your mother-in-law must be ugly, and you ain't so good looking yourself." So this guy rips us to shreds, tells us the problems that we have, and this business was built on 3 assumptions, all right? Assumption number 1, because we were competing against Sun Microsystems, is that Sun would let us poach customers in their, because we did something they couldn't do, by the way. But they sold servers, but we did Larry was a genius and had great technology. Amazing stuff. However, Sun was the 800-pound gorilla. And those guys had convinced themselves and venture capitalists that Sun was going to allow them to come into the market and poach, come into the market and help these customers out. Because I believe that their real plan was to grow to a certain size and have Sun buy all the technology. Well, that wasn't going to happen, because Sun management may have said to somebody, "Well, we're not, you guys are going to be small. It doesn't matter." So that was the first thing, that Sun was going to let us into their chicken coop. And I have never owned a chicken coop, but I can imagine having a, very aggressive team of foxes going into the chicken coop, not a good idea. I'm just saying that. I'm going on a limb. Second assumption was that companies would see this and say, "Yeah, I see the inherent value and I'm going to go buy this." Well, they saw the value. However, what they didn't count on, which was number 3, is that it doesn't matter how big the building is. It doesn't matter how full the parking lot is. It doesn't matter of any of that stuff. Every single nickel of every single big company, and for those of you who try to understand how to sell complicated things to big companies, every single dollar is accounted for. Every dollar is in a budget. Everybody is doing that. They already know how much they're going to spend on paper clips next year. See, they're cost accountants and all of this stuff. This isn't new, but these guys thought we could waltz in, lay this out and say $350,000, and somebody would walk over and peel it off of the stack in the vault, put it into a gym bag and bring it back out. So here's the VP. This is a good story. Here's the VP. He's now shredded us. And I said, "Well, let me tell you," because I shared with him the fact that we thought from lead, because see, that lead came in. They were interested in what we did, to buying it was 90 days. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was pretty close. This is insane. He goes, "Listen, I've got 2 kids. If you called me on the phone and said, I need to get this $350,000 PO through this company," and this guy was a real VP. It's not like a bank VP where, they let you fill the water or something. And he said, "If you told me that you had one of my kids in the trunk of a car and I needed to get a $350,000 contract through in 90 days, assuming that we started on the first day, basically I'd ask you which kid, because, I have a favorite. And the other thing is, I'm still young. My wife, I think, can still have kids, and maybe we need to start looking to get that other kid, because I'm not even going to try to deal with the political battle of spending $350,000 over budget for you guys." Now, he said it that way, and everybody in the room erupted in amazing, uproarious laughter, of which Dick is just slow burning, which is why you've already heard Dick talking about fire me in the car, because Dick looked at me and said, "You set that up, right? What is my payoff, small-minded person? Why would I do that?" He is telling you the truth. You cannot sell this out of this. So that means if you got them really interested and they all said yes, when they're going to buy it? Next year, if they get it in the budget and they get the budget approved and they've shown validity. So long story of this is that they overshot and underestimated what it would take to make this thing work. So what I hope you've gotten from so far here in part 1, and what we're doing with this, is the fact that if you have that kind of crazy bullshit in your head and you think that way, you need to ask yourself, is this at all possible given the circumstances and situation? I was talking to a customer of mine in high tech. Now I'm letting a little cat out of the bag, meow. And he said, John, you know what? We're looking at long-term planning, and I see in your future, essentially units, we're already under contract. We're already building and shipping and making money with this guy. But we're doing our long-term forecast, and I see in third quarter, fourth quarter of 24, first and second quarter of 25, the following forecast, which will slip to the right, by the way. So here we are in October, as I'm recording this, 22, and this guy is talking about 2 years from now as if it's going to happen next week. Now, he said, I fully intend to still be on the program because I've got 9 years left before I'm going to retire. So you got to understand, timing is important and knowing what this is. And most of the time people don't. So I will wrap up by saying it's been a wild ride in high tech. You're going to hear part 2 somewhere down the road, maybe even next week. But the reality of it is that high tech was a great business for the following reasons. And this was from my original analysis and why I pivoted. Number one is they have had and have stupid money. People disproportionately spend money on want proof. There are people right now who are working. I don't denigrate anybody who's working, who have $1,000 phones. You know, if you ask them to go spend money on themselves for certain things, they've got a $1,000 phone and they're lusting after the next $1,000 phone. Not everybody, but that's stupid money in technology. Number two, for the most part, when you're competing against people who don't actively know how to sell, you're in a very positive position because you can actually best them much faster than in other markets where you have very competitive people. And the third thing is that if you come up with an innovative idea, you come up with something that people don't have and they want, you can catch an updraft and you can see remarkable success in a very short period of time. And with that, I want to thank Sandra and you for spending some time with me, John Paul Mendoza, Dr. Street Selling. This has been the Raging Verbalist 147, 40 years in high tech and counting. We're still going further. We didn't even get into the question about, do I plan to be still selling this in 40 years? Life extension, you never know. Everybody's got to make a quota someday. So with that, have a great one. Make sure that you go to our Facebook page and Position to Win book. Also go to positiontowinbook.com. There's some free stuff. There's some other things. Check out the books. And more importantly, make sure that you have a long-term view. Last piece is that life is short, but it's a marathon. It is based upon cumulative gathered experience that makes you more successful. Keep learning, keep preparing, and opportunity will show up for you.